Hi, welcome everyone um, to Econoception, learning with diagrams, and this is our second lesson about production possibility curve part 2. Okay, so today we're going to cover the same curve but with a lot more fun and with a lot more different concepts you're going to learn. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to look at is again the same diagram from last week. Okay, this diagram is a production possibility curve with con on the y-axis and u on the x-axis. So from this diagram, you can see that I have labeled 3 different points, A, B, and C. So what are these 3 different points? What do they represent? Okay, if you have paid attention last week, and I hope you did, and you will be able to answer this question that I've just asked you. So what is point C? Point C is basically a point where the economy is unable to produce at because of the constraints of its available resources that it has. Point A is a point where the economy is able to produce, but it is not fully utilizing its available resources. Or basically, it is either in the case of underemployment or unemployment of resources. And hence, there's a possibility of it moving from point A to point B, which is on the PPC curve. And actually a point where there is the available resources are fully utilized. So any point on the PPC curve represents a point where resources are fully utilized to produce that combination of con and u, or that combination of goods and services. Okay, so I've noted here that point B could represent full employment but does not guarantee full employment. Why is that the case? Okay, I'll challenge all of you to answer this question and post it in the comments below this video if you have the answer to this question. Okay, that will really demonstrate a good understanding of economics and this concept of PPC. Next, okay, notice that I have drawn two PPC curves here. So previously we were talking about a movement from a point that is within the PPC curve to the point that's on the PPC curve. So now, what is this? This is actually a shift of the PPC curve. So in what cases would there actually be a shift of the PPC curve? So I've noted down the 3 possibilities here. Firstly is the increase in the quality of resources, which could be the case of a higher productivity or productivity growth, where you can use the same amount of land or the same amount of labor or the capital to produce actually more goods and services because now you are using them more effectively or more efficiently. Secondly is an increase in the quantity of resources. So there can be more land, more labor, or more capital. All this definitely can induce the amount of output that you can produce to increase because with more labor you can produce more corn or wool. And technological change, basically improvements in production processes and so on, or discovery of a new technology that makes the production of wool a lot more efficient. So notice here I've drawn that this production possibility curve shifts outward more for wool than for corn. Well, sorry, proportion wise it's more for wool than for corn because in absolute terms you can see that the axes are different. So basically what I'm showing here is that the increase in the resources or any of these factors here actually contributed to more resources that are more suited to the production of corn being actually made available. So it could actually also be the case where it's a proportionate shift. So that will mean that the increase in the resources or the increase in any of these factors here benefited both production of corn and production of wool equally. Now, I've labeled 3 points here, A, B, and C. So we have looked at points that are on the PPC curve and points within and points outside. But how do we actually differentiate between A, B, and C? I mean, what makes A a better point than B, or B a better point than C, or like C a better point than A? How do you actually tell where the economy should produce at? Notice the word should because now there's the question of, which of these outputs will actually maximize or benefit society to its utmost. Okay, so to understand the concept of benefit or welfare, we have to first look at how do economists define these concepts. Okay, and this is where we look at the theory of rationality or rational decision making. So this whole assumption of economics that we have, this assumption of the basic model of economics is that individuals seek to maximize their own welfare. What do I mean by this? Basically, individuals are selfish. Individuals are people who, human beings are people who want to maximize their own interest, to maximize their own benefits and so on. Okay, so under this assumption that we make about individuals, about society, we then propose this idea of rationality, that each person is optimizing his behavior in order to maximize his own welfare. And what do I mean by optimizing your behavior? Okay, let's say you have given a set of constraints, for example, your income, your given prices of goods and services, and for example, your preferences for different goods and services. How do you actually maximize your welfare? That's the question that each of us is asking ourselves. So take for example, let's say you want to buy 10 oranges or 20 apples. Okay, so how do you actually decide between these two goods? First, you look at your income. Second, you look at the relative prices of these two goods. Okay, and third, you think about how do you value these two goods relative to each other. Which do you value more, and so on. Okay, and then you make a decision of how many apples you want and how many oranges you want, and so on. Okay, so to actually put these concepts into more quantitative terms, or to actually clarify it further, what economists say is that people are actually thinking at the margin. So rational decision makers are thinking at the margin. So they're asking themselves the question: does an additional unit of this activity increase or decrease my total welfare? In other words, is my marginal benefit, which is a very key term, and larger than my marginal cost if I choose to consume an additional unit of the good? So what does this actually mean? This is like a mumbo jumbo and a load of crap. Okay, but it actually makes sense, because let's say you are choosing to you're deciding whether you're hungry, so you go to a sandwich store and you see that there are like 6 sandwiches on the counter. So how do you actually decide how many sandwiches to buy? Okay, so a rational decision maker, I'm not saying that you actually do this process consciously, but a rational decision maker actually will think through, let's say I buy one sandwich, what is my marginal benefit? How much benefit will I derive from this one sandwich? And what is the cost of buying it? It will be the price that I'll pay, the amount of dollars I'll sacrifice, which could have been actually used to watch a movie or go out with friends and so on. So that's the marginal cost of buying that unit of sandwich. So I'll compare this to, if the marginal benefit is larger than the cost, I will go ahead and buy the sandwich for myself to eat. Okay, and then after consuming the sandwich, let's say I still feel hungry, so I will think about it again. Should I buy another sandwich? Is my marginal benefit now still going to be higher? Okay, because I've already eaten one, so obviously I'm not as hungry as before. So my marginal benefit from consuming the second sandwich is actually lower than the first one. So you can see that the marginal benefit in general for most goods is decreasing as our quantity of goods consumed increases. Okay, so that's like one of the main assumptions we have here, and it's mostly true. Okay, because the more you consume, the less you feel satisfied from the next unit of good. Okay, and hence you will take that diminished marginal cost, the diminished marginal benefit, and compare it with the marginal cost. So again, if let's say your marginal benefit is higher, you consume another sandwich. Okay, and there will come a point where the marginal benefit of consuming another sandwich is not as high as the marginal cost, it's lower than the marginal cost. So in that case, you'll stop consuming. So basically, we'll consume or produce until the point where our marginal benefit equals to our marginal cost. Okay, and that is a very important concept in economics. So there are many cases where you can find counter examples or exceptions to this rule, and there's actually a whole field of economics built about it, which is called irrational economics, or like behavioral economics. You can find out more about it online in books and so on. You can read a book called you can read books like Freakonomics, or you can read books like this book that I was reading recently, Predictably Irrational. Okay, they actually talk more about how human beings are irrational creatures, and we actually don't follow these rules of economics. So, but in most of the stuff that we are going to do in this course, in microeconomics and as well as macroeconomics, we are going to be focusing on the assumption of rationality. Okay, that's going to be the main general assumption that we're going to follow with. Okay, so now we go back to the same diagram again. Okay, A, B, and C. How do you actually know that A is better than B, or vice versa? B is better than A. How do you actually decide? Okay, so still we find ourselves unable to decide, because right now we only know that human beings want to maximize their own individual welfare, and we know that they do so through a process of rational decision making, which is thinking at the margin. So still we can't actually tell whether A is better than B, and so on. So what else do we actually need? Okay, we need concepts about the societies as a whole. So look at this case, we are looking at the economy. Okay, how does the economy know whether A is better than B? Well, you must think about the whole economy as a whole. How does the society as a whole maximize its welfare? Okay, so now the concepts are allocative efficiency. Okay, basically it's a situation where the combination of goods and services produced by the economy, basically by the economic agents, consumers, producers, maximizes society's welfare given the existing state of income distribution. So, it's a huge chunk of words. What does it actually mean? Okay, so basically, okay, let's look at the diagram again. So what I'm trying to say is that, let's say point B is an allocatively efficient point. Let's assume it's an allocatively efficient point. What conditions must it satisfy? Basically, at point B, society's welfare must be maximized. Okay? In other words, there's no way that I can improve anyone's welfare without making someone else worse off. So imagine if I move from point B to point A. Now I'll have to produce less wool and more corn. So by producing less wool, I'll make those people who value wool quite highly and consuming it worse off because now they cannot consume the same amount of wool. So this is not going to be a productive efficient point. Sorry, an allocatively efficient improvement. Whereas if let's say I was within the PPC curve, okay, and I was going to at point A, okay, and point B, which is the allocatively efficient point that we have defined by definition, okay, will from point A to point B will actually be an improvement because now we are able to make people better off by producing more corn without sacrificing any wool. So no one else is made worse off by this increase in production. So point B is allocatively efficient and point A is not allocatively efficient. And this improvement here is called a Pareto improvement. Okay, I will not go into too much details here, but just take note. It's called a Pareto improvement. Okay, which means that you're making society as a whole better off. You're making someone better off without making anyone else worse off. All right, and take note here this assumption of given the existing state of income distribution. What does this actually mean? What can you tell from this assumption here? So what it actually means is that if you were to change the distribution of income in the economy, the whole situation will change. You'll not have the same allocatively efficient point. And it becomes clear because if let's say at point B you have a distribution of income among consumers where everyone values corn and wool perhaps about the same, about more or less equally, and to a point where you shift income to people who value wool more highly. And as a result, point B is not going to be the same. It's not going to be allocatively efficient anymore because right now, if people value wool more highly, definitely somewhere, let's say point C will be an allocatively efficient point instead, because now at that point, consumers' welfare will be higher. There will definitely be cases where at point B it's possible to increase consumer welfare without making anyone else worse off. If let's say people value wool more because you can just cut down corn and give them more wool, and they will feel better off, and no one else can be, and whereas no one else is made worse off. So improvement to C is possible in that case. And it answers the questions of how much to produce and what to produce. So these are the key questions that we want to answer in any economic process. And the next concept is productive efficiency. So productive efficiency is a situation where a given output of goods and services are produced with the lowest possible unit cost, given the available technology. In other words, it's a question of how to produce the given goods, how to produce a combination of goods and services. So take note about this definition. I'll explain it with the diagram. So which points here on the diagram are productive efficient? Okay, is A productive efficient? Is B productive efficient? Is C productive efficient? Well, if you've answered A and B, bingo, because those are the 2 points that are productive efficient. And why is that the case? Okay, let's just compare point A and point C. Okay, what makes point A productive efficient, but point C not productive efficient? Well, just look at let's move this slightly. Okay, and point C being here, so I can do a easier comparison. And let's say at this quantity of wool that's being produced here is 30. Okay, so let's say to produce 30 units of wool and 200 units of corn, that's point A. Okay, to produce this amount of corn and this amount of wool, okay, you have two different options. So now you can choose point C or point A. If you were to produce at point C, what is the opportunity cost of producing 100 units of corn? What is the opportunity cost? Can you answer that question? Okay, the opportunity cost of producing 100 units of corn is 30 units of wool. So what's the opportunity cost of producing 1 unit of corn? It's 30 divided by 100, which is 3 over 10. Okay, so that's the opportunity cost of producing 1 unit of corn. Let's look at point A. Okay, point A is you produce approximately about 200 units of corn for 30 units of wool. So what's the opportunity cost of producing corn at point A? Per unit of corn is 200 divided by 30, which is, it's 30 divided by 200, which is 3 over 20. So 3 over 20 is less than 3 over 10. So the opportunity cost, or in other words, the cost of production at point A is actually lower than cost of production at point C. So point C is not productively efficient. And at point A, is there any way we can actually lower the opportunity cost of any of the goods without actually changing or without actually decreasing any of the goods being produced? No, because it's at it's already at the maximum. It's already on the production possibility curve. You cannot shift, cannot produce outside of it. So since you cannot produce outside of it, this point must be the productively efficient point. And similarly for B, you have the same explanation and the same conclusions. Okay, so that is productive efficiency. How about allocative efficiency? Again, our model here is not able to illustrate that with just a production possibility curve because we're not able to include what are the consumption preferences here. Okay, and that is a critical part of an economy. The economy has to balance, has to make sure that the decisions being made actually maximizes society's welfare, and the only way that such a optimum scenario can be achieved is if we consider both production possibility and consumption preferences. So in other words, we need another curve here to sort of form an intersection, and that is actually not in the syllabus. You need an indifference curve, to actually find out where the allocatively efficient points are. So if you are more interested, go and Google indifference curves and you can find out more about it. And so now we look at a slightly different diagram. So I'm going to pose this point about how production possibility curve is actually drawn for a given time period. Okay, so take note of this black curve here. Okay, this black curve here represents right now, this time period, right now. So right now, we can produce either A, B, or C. These are three choices that I have for you. And on the y-axis, we have capital goods. Capital goods are basically machinery, factory. It's the same as the capital that I mentioned in resources. That's capital goods. And consumption goods are like your iPads, iPods, or like your food, water, anything that you will consume right now. Just for right now, consumption right now. Okay, so economy basically faces the trade-off between capital goods and consumption goods. Since we are given a pool of resources and we can only choose to make this many consumption or production decisions with them. And so given these 3 points, I've also labeled another point here, which I label as I, which is the level of investment needed to overcome depreciation. What is depreciation? Okay, take for example factories or machines. Over time, the machines will wear down. They will they'll be damaged. The factories will have to be repaired. All these maintenance works that will have to be done. So basically, in order to maintain our capital goods at their existing quality or existing quantity, to maintain the level of resources available in the economy at its existing state, we have to actually produce some capital goods per year, or produce some capital goods now. Because if we don't do so, the capital goods will wear out, and as a result, in the next time frame, we might have fewer resources available to us. So B is the amount of capital goods that we must produce as an economy in order to overcome this level of depreciation, such that we actually maintain the same level of capital stock. So let's say now the economy chooses to produce at point B. What happens in the next time period? Next time period, which is let's say next year, we will still be at this black production possibility curve. There will be no change to our production possibility because we have managed to overcome the level of depreciation by producing this amount of goods and service. By producing this amount of capital goods. However, if we were to actually produce at point C in this time period, where we actually favor present consumption more highly than future consumption, which means that we produce at point C and we produce more consumption goods than point B and fewer capital goods than point B. So what happens is we are unable to overcome depreciation of our capital goods. And as a result, since our pool of resources, our pool of capital shrinks in the next time period our production possibility curve shrinks because now we have fewer resources, our quality of our resources has deteriorated and we're not investing enough to compensate for it. Okay, so this is not a desirable scenario, obviously, because it means that the society or the economy is less productive in the next time period than this time period. And point A is the converse of that, which is that point A, you can actually, if you have been producing at point A in this time period, the next time period will actually mean that you have more capabilities, you have more production capabilities to produce additional units of capital and consumption goods because you have done the needed investment in capital goods to actually increase the production possibilities of an economy. So the concept here is very important, which is that static efficiency, which is productive efficiency at any point A, B, and C, or even allocative efficiency, let's say point B or point C could be allocatively efficient, we don't know. Okay, these points might not be desirable in the long term because by producing at C, let's say at C, you're not efficient in the next time period. Okay, you are this concept of dynamic efficiency. Dynamic efficiency is being sacrificed. Okay, so a key trade-off here is that capital goods and consumption goods. The more capital goods we produce in this time period, the more consumption goods we can experience in the future, whereas we sacrifice some of the consumption now. Whereas the more consumption we should have now, the less we can have in the future. So there's this idea of a trade-off, and economists love trade-offs. That's all we look at, okay? And so right now I'm going to do a brief summary of what we have covered into this lesson. I hope you have enjoyed it so far. And so firstly, a point on a PPC is always productively efficient, and the shift of a PPC reflects changing quantities and qualities of resources and the level of technology in the economy. Thirdly, rational decision makers think at the margin, and fourthly, allocative efficiency is a situation where the combination of goods and services produced by the economy maximizes society's welfare given the existing state of income distribution. And finally, society faces a trade-off between future and present consumption. So I hope that you will join me in the next lesson, because right now you have found out what the aims of the economy are. How do we actually move on from here? How do we actually organize the economy to achieve these aims? What guarantees that AE and PE will be achieved? And what about equality, or what about fairness? How do we actually determine who gets these goods that we produce? How do we distribute these goods? How do we make sure that this distribution is fair or equal? Are these important questions in economics? Do we actually ask these questions, or do we just ignore them? All these are questions that I'm sure that you guys are burning to find out. Okay, and before I end here, I'm going to talk a bit about the newsletter that I've just introduced. Then I'm going to be releasing the first copy, the first inaugural copy of the newsletter this week, this Sunday, which is tomorrow. And I hope that I can get as many of you interested and actually sign up to this thing. Okay, as you have read in the article, all I need from you is just your name, your school, and why you actually are interested in learning more about economics and why you want to do it right now. Okay, and trust me, this resource is going to be a brilliant resource. It's going to be extremely helpful because I'm going to be compiling news articles, 3 or 4 news articles that are about microeconomics or macroeconomics, about current affairs right now that's happening in Singapore or in the rest of the world. And I'm going to give you question prompts, as well as I'm going to give you a lot of examples and even some answers to some of these questions that help you get a better picture of how you can apply what you have learned in H2 economics into understanding the real world, understanding the real economic issues that are facing the world right now, and how to bridge this gap between, let's say, theory and reality. That's a thing that a lot of students struggle with, and I hope that I can help you with that. And it will definitely help in your essay, in your case study, and perhaps even in your general paper. So I'm hoping that more of you actually take this up, and that's all. And I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson, and till next time, dream economics.